Okay, so yeah, I'm Luke. If you want to follow along the slides, it's slides.lukeb.co.uk/frontendne 2018 curtains, because I couldn't think of a better URL to separate the two talks. So a couple of content warnings. I have some videos and some loud noises. Content warnings will appear in the bottom right-hand corner. My right, your left, I guess. They will appear down there, so keep your eye on there if you think videos and loud noises will affect you. So yeah, I'm Luke Bonaccorsi. I'm a software engineer at Skybet and Gaming, down in Leeds. You've probably heard of Skybet. If you want a job in Leeds, we're hiring. I organize Leeds.js, which is the meetup, which is far less well organized than this. I tweet at CodeFoodPixels. I blog at lukeb.co.uk, and I'm a hardware noob. That's important for the context of this. I live in fear of burning my house down whenever I do any of this stuff. And I'm lazy. If there's a way I can not do something, I won't do it. And because I'm lazy, automation's fantastic because I can just automate away the boring things. In everyday life, we're surrounded by automation. We probably don't realize it. So stuff like traffic lights, automatic doors, cash machines, motion sensing lights, automatic hand dryers. And that's just the stuff I noticed and paid attention to today, it shows how prevalent it is in our everyday lives. And as consumers, we're embracing it more and more in our homes in our everyday life. So there's heating with the Nest thermostat, and lighting with the Philips Hue bulbs, and even IKEA have got a really cheap set of bulbs now that you can control through various means. And then access control with smart door locks. And these usually have APIs so that you can interact with them however you want. So you can write scripts and run them from the command line so you can feel like a hacker, and you can write node services with dashboards and pull everything together and make it look beautiful and have it all in one place to control it. And over the past few years, there's been what I'm calling a bot uprising. They're quickly becoming bigger and bigger part of our lives and helping us with more and more things. And they can be connected directly to a chat system. So you can get a node module for Facebook Messenger or Slack or Hangouts, things like that. And you can build a single purpose bot really easily and really quickly because you just listen to some really quick, some sort of straightforward events. Or you can use a framework to build a more fully featured bot that has multiple connections to different chat systems. So there's Microsoft Bot Framework or BotKit. And it makes it easier to have a fully fledged system with all sorts of different actions. And then virtual assistants are becoming more and more popular. So we've got Siri, Alexa, and Google Assistant. And they're basically bots, but a hell of a lot smarter because they're backed by massive data systems in Google's warehouse or wherever. And they're in our homes with things like the Echo and the HomePod and the Google Home, and helping out with stuff like reading out news or playing music or buying things. And the uprising's only just beginning. They're becoming more and more popular, more and more prevalent. So in mid-2014, I started working on my own chatbot. It's called Woodhouse. It's named after the butler on the TV show Archer. I was going to call it Jarvis, and then was thinking, like, it's not going to be anywhere near as good, and then started thinking of worse butlers, and Woodhouse is a terrible butler, so Woodhouse. It's open source, it's all written in JavaScript, it runs on nodes, it sits on a Raspberry Pi behind my TV, it's all MIT licensed, because why not have a go with do whatever you like with it, and it's all up on GitHub, there's the link at the end. It's modular and extensible, so the core is just a router with some common functionality like broadcasting, scheduling, and preference storage. And then there are two types of modules. So there are plugins that do the heavy lifting, so like replying with text or connecting to APIs or interacting with hardware. And then you've got your interfaces, which are your ways to communicate with it, which is generally a chat system. So like a node module, as I mentioned earlier, and then you have a bit of glue code to make it work with Woodhouse. So in the beginning, I only wanted to download films. I was sat in a meeting at my previous place of work with one of my friends, and we were waiting for it to start. Somebody was late, and he was VPN'd into a Raspberry Pi at home on his iPads, queuing up movies to download. And I thought that seemed like a lot of effort, because you've got to find the right ones and see what ones work. I already knew of software that could download movies for me. It had an API. I just wanted to be able to send a message, say, I want this film, it to reply with an IMDb link saying, is this the film that you meant? I can confirm it, say yes, and it goes off and downloads it. And by the time I'm home, it's done. But before I did that, I can't remember how, but I managed to automate my lamps. I don't know how I got to this stage, but so I send a message and the lights go off. And then I take my time. Eventually, I send another message and they come back on. And when I first did this, I was sat giggling to myself because as web developers, we don't get real-world effects of what we do. We see a button change color on the screen or something appear or something move. I felt like a god. I was making things happen. And I was giggling to myself. It's so cool. I still get a little smile when I do it and realize it. So this the hardware that I use for it. It's a plug that I bought from China for about £15. I have to use an adapter because they have the Chinese plug on the back, so it means it's really safe. I found out that you could telnet into it by just poking around. And then I found a Google group that had found the SSH passwords because it's hard-coded on the device. It's not accessible to the internet, it's just accessible to your local network. So I logged in and found out that it runs OpenWRT, which is a small Linux distribution designed for routers. And it's got a web server on it. So you can drop scripts onto it and basically build an API. So I have an endpoint that I hit it with one parameter, it turns the relay inside it on. I hit it with another parameter, it turns it off. And then I've got another parameter that will give me the status of the relay. And then I have a separate page that can configure some bits about it, like the name, some tags, so I can say the location or a group of lamps, stuff like that. And then a script every 2 minutes that broadcasts that information plus its IP so that Woodhouse can pick it up and know where the lamp is. So I don't have to manually go and configure stuff because that's a pain in the arse. And I use this every day. When I get home tonight, when I eventually get back to Leeds, I will pull my phone out of my pocket, send a message, and all my lamps will come on. It's fantastic because I can just walk in the door and not stumble over everything, and I know where I'm going. I don't walk into chairs and stuff. Or I can use Google Now when I'm driving. I just shout. I'm not going to say it because everyone's phone will go bing. But I can shout at my phone and basically get it to send a message. And then I added other little bits. I eventually added the TV and film downloaders, but I never used it because Netflix, it's way easier. And stuff like checking if websites are up and reminders so I can put a pizza in the oven and send a message to get it to remind me and not forget about pizza because burnt pizza is terrible. That pizza's really good. And then I had all these other ideas of stuff I could get it to control. But I started to rewrite it because that's what we do as developers. The old code was a mess. I'd just been really excited as I was building stuff and throwing code at it, and it was just this mound of code that I knew what he was doing. It was just difficult to make any changes. But restructuring it meant that I got to use the S6 because the IO.js stuff was happening around then. So I got to use all that nice stuff. And because I knew what bits of functionality worked together and how they worked, I could split it up into nicer chunks. And it all just worked because I just upgraded the version of Node and chucked the JavaScript in it. It does it. So I gave this the first version of this talk back in November 2016. It was a completely different talk, really. But I wanted to do something new. So I automated my curtains. So I send a message, they open. I don't know if you can hear that. But it's really loud. And it's a bit creepy looking. I don't know what it looks like from the outside. Just stand in the window and have them close. But it works. It kind of works. So these are the parts for it. This is a plastic box that I bought from a supermarket. Some string I bought from eBay, a servo. Some plastic wheels I also bought off of eBay. And then some pipe mounts or pipe clamps that I bought to clamp everything onto the curtain rail. And this is the basic idea of how it works. That's the top view. They're a loop of string. The curtains are attached either side, and depending which way the string rotates, it either opens it or closes it. It's not fantastic, but it worked. And then this is the brains of it. This an ESP8266. It's a microcontroller like an Arduino, but it's got Wi-Fi. It costs a couple of pounds from China. Problem with that is they take like a month to arrive, so last time I bought 20. And this one runs a the version that I used here runs a firmware called MongoOS. And that means you can write JavaScript. And I wrote 75 lines of JavaScript and controlled my curtains. It has endpoints for opening, closing, and giving me the status. It has the ability to configure it to sort of say how long to try and open them for. And then some broadcasting so that Woodhouse can pick it up. And there's so much cool stuff for JavaScript and hardware. So I mentioned MongoOS, but there's stuff like Johnny 5 and Cylon.js, which they work on Arduinos and Raspberry Pis. You've got to tether them to a computer. At least for Arduinos, you've got to tether it to a computer, so you've got to have it connected by a USB. But for Raspberry Pi, it just works. For a Raspberry Pi, you could just run Node on the Raspberry Pi. And then you've got development boards that have it built in as a first-class citizen. So Espruino, Tessel, they're a little bit more expensive, but they treat it as a first-class citizen. Espruino you can run on the ESP8266 as well. It's just a little bit of configuration. You can flash it onto the board. There's loads more of this stuff on the web as well. I can't remember the names of the ones I've seen recently. But there's more and more propping up because JavaScript is becoming a more and more popular language and people want to do this stuff. It makes it really easy to dive in having this language that people know and not having to figure out that, okay, I have to use this variant of C or whatever. And then I got bored over Christmas 2016 and started shouting on my laptop, and it wasn't out of frustration, it was for voice control. Woodhouse. Turn off lamps.
Chair lamp has been turned on. TV lamp has been turned on. House lamp has been turned on.
Woodhouse. Why did that go really quiet? Turn on lamps.
Chair lamp has been turned on. TV lamp has been turned on. House lamp has been turned on.
So it's got the worst reply voice ever, but that's the default in Festival, which I used to run Linux as my main OS, and that was a text-to-speech program on Linux. It worked, if sounding a bit terrifying. So it's got offline hot word detection, which we all love because it means nothing's constantly recording us. Using a library called Snowboy, you go to their website, you say a phrase or a word 3 times, it gives you a little model to download, you drop it into your project, and then it'll recognize you. And then for the main part of it, I use the Google Speech API because they have a ton more data than I will ever have. And you get 60 minutes free a month, chunks up into 15 seconds blocks. But you could use Azure or Amazon instead, whatever you want to use. And this just sends the information to the main hub. It's a separate process that runs, and the main hub carries out the action. And eventually I'm going to have Raspberry Pi scattered all around my house with microphones and speakers so that I can just be anywhere and shout at Woodhouse. So you might have heard, you've heard of Nest, I mentioned it earlier. You might have heard of Hive. I want to introduce a brand new entry into the smart heating arena. It's called Set. It's a revolutionary JavaScript-based Wi-Fi enabled thermostat. It's got incredible timeless design, and it's crafted from the finest materials. It's got the ability to boost and pause so that If you're working from home, you can have the heating on, or if you're coming home late, you can not have it waste power. You can set a minimum temperature so the pipes don't freeze, which was really useful when I stress tested this shortly after I made it and went to Scotland. I was sending messages to my phone to it constantly. It's like, have the pipes frozen? No, good. Because the temperature was constantly above the minimum temperature, so that's fine. And then an API so that I can change settings. And of course, it connects to Woodhouse because why wouldn't I? So this is what my thermostat looked like. I live in a rented house. This is actually from my old house. I need to do some work for my new house for it. But it wasn't really accurate, so you'd set it to like be 20 degrees and at like 15, it would turn the heating off. So it was kind of terrible. And I found that you could pry the wheel off, and there's a potentiometer with a notch on it. So I 3D printed a wheel that can attach to the potentiometer, and then attach that to a servo, and then 3D printed a case to hold all the parts. And this sits on the front of the thermostat. It's got a schedule. It checks the temperature every couple of seconds and makes the decision. And then it basically just turns the potentiometer either to maximum or minimum to turn it on or off. So I'm not caring about how it controls the temperature. My smart thing does the temperature control. And I know the heating's on or off. The circuit for it is straightforward. It's an ESP8266 with the temperature sensor, a resistor because the internet told me I needed one, and a servo that turns the dial. It runs Mongoose OS again, because that's what I was familiar with when I started writing it. And yeah, it ran my heating last winter, which is great. Like, having that control is fantastic. It meant that I could be out of the house and pause the heating if I was going to be out late, or turn it on earlier if I'm going to be home earlier and stuff like that. And I want to make it smarter so that it knows I'm going to be home at a certain or the schedule is set to be on at a certain time, so that, okay, the temperature is this now, it needs to be this at this time, so we'll turn it on now, and it'll take that amount of time to get to that temperature. So I'm not getting home and it's still being a bit cold. So that's the story so far, but it's only just the beginning. In the future, I have loads of plans. So I've moved house in July? Yeah, July. And I don't have curtains in my new house. I have blinds in every room. So I want to control the blinds, which will probably look really weird because they're all vertical blinds. If I tell it to control at once, just all of them snap shut, would be, it would look haunted again. And the thermostat's different. It's not a unit like that. It's an RF one, so it's radio. So I've got to do a bit of hacking to figure out what to send to do that. So that'll be quite fun. I've got the hardware for it. I just need to give it a go. And then I want to add a third module type of data providers so that I can have like light sensors around and do stuff based on them, or temperature sensors. And then I can hook that into a recipe system like IFTTT so that when my phone connects to the network and it's dark outside, I can turn on the lamps and close the blinds. And then have natural language processing so that I can actually speak a bit more naturally. When I did the audio video, it was, I said, Woodhouse turn on lounge lamps, which doesn't feel natural, it feels very forced. But if I could say Woodhouse turn on the lounge lamps, it feels a lot easier to say. I don't have to remember specific commands. And then I want to have a unit in my car so that I can control the music and contact the main hub and not control the car itself, because that's a terrible idea. And then more hardware. I've really enjoyed learning bits about hardware. Like, I've had an idea of how to do door locks. It's probably not the greatest idea to control my own door lock, but I'm going to do it. And I'm genuinely terrified of the prospect of home ownership, not because of having a mortgage and being grown up, but because I'll probably burn the house down doing this stuff. So at the start of this talk, I said I'm lazy. I need to correct that. I'm the ridiculous kind of lazy, where I'll spend hundreds and hundreds of hours making things so I don't have to do silly little tasks, such as turning the lamps on and closing the curtains. I'm the personification of this XKCD. But it goes further than that. I'm not just here to show off all the cool stuff I've built. I think it's cool, at least. I'm here with the aim of inspiring you to build cool stuff, to show you that you can do some really cool stuff with JavaScript and hardware. I've learned so much whilst building these things. So I've learned a lot about JavaScript itself. I've learned ES6 doing this stuff. I learned some bits about UDP and some stuff about hardware. And every time I found an area that I was interested in, I would keep going. I'd dive into it and throw myself at it, because there's loads more for me to learn, and I really like that. I even bought a 3D printer because of this. I printed the case for the thermostat, and it means that future stuff is way easier because I've just got a printer. And I realized a great analogy whilst working on this talk. If you were learning to cook, you wouldn't cook stuff that you don't enjoy eating, because there's no point, because you're just like, I made this, bin. There's no point. You want to make stuff that you enjoy eating. So in the same vein, when you're learning how to code stuff, if you have the ability, pick something that's weird and interesting to you, that you're invested in, that you're enthused about, because it keeps you going. You can hack it, you can cut corners, you can refactor it, it's fine. You don't have to show anyone what it is, it doesn't have to be perfect. But you can show it off if you're happy to, because people will probably be interested. And it's interesting. And I have one last thing. So this jumper, some of you might have noticed there's some wires. This is the public debut of this jumper. If you go to this URL, you can control it. Anyone going to get the phone out and try it? So the hardware is all JavaScript controlled. Anyone? Come on. Hey. So you're all going to be fighting over the lights now. This was an idea I had like a few weeks ago, and the main reason is so that I can win a Christmas jumper competition at work. Last year, someone won with a dancing hat, which isn't a Christmas jumper competition. So this year I'm going to win. So that's the talk. Yeah, my Twitter is codefoodpixels. I blog at lukeb.co.uk. All the stuff for Woodhouse is in its own organization, which is github.com/woodhouse. I got GitHub to boot someone off that had that URL because they weren't using it. So yeah, if you go and have a look, poke around at it, feel free to do what you like with the codes. And that's it for the first talk.